Mhm. But I don't think you have to allow people to enter. But if you do it'll pop up.
Okay.
Someone's in the waiting room and you've got to allow. But I think we've set up the meeting so that people can just join without the waiting room.
Okay.
So it should be okay. Do you want to be a bit closer? We can remove this back row.
Morning.
Yeah. Or indeed. Then why don't if you want, you could come all the way.
Yeah. I mean, everybody is quite far back.
Yeah. They're afraid of the questions. Oh no, here. Yes. Oh, last night. Yeah. How did you find it?
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah. He's going to teach us. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, you're right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're recording.
Yes, we're recording. Okay. Yeah. If you want to move forward, you're most welcome to. Or do you prefer to view from the back?
No, that's a hip thing for me. It's sitting on the ground at the moment for a long time.
You're welcome to bring your chair forward if you want.
No, but it's okay. I can hear. I can put my hand up. I'm not avoiding. I'm not. I promise I'm not.
Having a very long lead on it, and it's hard, you can't take it to the desk. You have to do it sitting in front of the computer. I could pull it out.
I'll show you for next time. Remind me. If you want to, you can go up to this row. Because I feel like if you need to sit in a chair, you should by default be relegated to the back.
Oh no, I don't feel relegated one
No?
bit.
Okay.
No, I do take it all in, and I try as much as I'm allowed to sit up over there.
Or yeah.
Open it from the other hand. Just close it up.
Ross, I suppose I could do like roving teaching, you know, I could just like rove around the classroom. Yes, you can please sit down. Okay, let's start with the prayers. We'll do the refuge and bodhicitta and the four immeasurables. Sangye chedan soge chonan la chanchu padu dani gyapsu chi dagi chenyengi pesonam ki drola bencher sangye drupa sho sangye chedan soge chonan la chanchu padu dani gyapsu chi dagi chenyengi pesonam ki drola bencher sangye drupa sho sangye chedan soge chonan la chanchu padu dani gyapsu chi Dagi Chayenge Petsonamke Drola Panchir Sangye Drupashu. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that knows no suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred, those held close and distant. Okay. So this is our second class on altruism and the 6 perfections. So last week we had a bit of a chat about the mind of enlightenment, or bodhicitta, didn't we? And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But first, so it's just going to talk a bit about, so we discussed the last 2 lines last week of this refuge and bodhicitta verse that we recite before the teachings. So we talked about, that generating that wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, or technically, like it says in the text, it says, drola panshir, so for the sake of sentient beings, that's the bit that comes first, may I attain the state of a Buddha. But before that, we've got these 2 lines that as the refuge part. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. So you guys probably all know, but it's good to have a sort of review in our minds of exactly what it means to go for refuge. So when we go for refuge, we recite that verse, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. But when we're reciting that verse, are we actually going for refuge or not? We're reciting the words, but are we actually going for refuge? Because going for refuge requires some kind of thought process, doesn't it? You have to actually do something with your mind. So when you go for refuge, for instance, to the Buddha, why would you go for refuge in the first place?
There are various reasons for connecting your motivation, protection, and the rest I have to think about experientially.
Yeah. But no, you've hit the nail on the head. So yes, it's we are correcting our motivation. That's the whole point of this verse, is to get our minds from thinking, about all the worldly things that we've been doing during, so far this morning, so far this week. So it's to get our minds to thinking, okay, so what is the real direction that I'm supposed to be putting my mind in? What's the, how am I supposed to be thinking now with this virtuous activity I'm about to undertake? What do I want to make that virtuous activity a cause for? So yeah, it's about correcting our motivation. And specifically, like you were saying about seeking protection, isn't that, when you go for refuge? So seeking protection from something. So we talk about seeking protection from fear. There's different types of fear that you might seek protection from. So for instance, the fear of, the fear of suffering, and specifically the suffering that you're going to encounter in the next life or future lifetimes. So one of the reasons why you might go for refuge, for instance, go for refuge to the Buddha, you're saying, well, could you protect me? It's can you protect me from this suffering that I may experience in future lifetimes? Thinking about how all of the negativities that we've accumulated, not just in this lifetime, but in previous lifetimes, over countless lifetimes in the past, all these negativities that we've accumulated, those negativities that we've engaged in, then lay a seed within our continuum that in the future, when it encounters the right conditions, will give rise to a negative result, which will be a type of suffering. So in future lifetimes, because we have all these seeds of negativities in our continuum, then when we encounter the conditions for those to ripen, then we'll experience those results. So it may be that we're going for refuge to the Buddha saying, can you protect me from those sufferings that I'm going to experience on the basis of the negativities I've accumulated? But when we go for refuge to the Buddha, it's not really about saying, can you protect me from your side? Because the Buddha is not able to just get rid of our negativities himself. I think Gansundru quoted this line, a few lines last night, didn't he? Was it last night? And he was saying, that the Buddha can't just can't wash away your negativities. The Buddha can't confer his realizations upon you. So when we go for refuge to the Buddha, we're not really just saying, oh, save me, protect me, protect me. What we're really saying is, teach me the methods by which I can protect myself.
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking. I'm not one that was sort of
I always arc up with the fear thing, because I hate being motivated by fear. It's more protect me from myself.
We create our own
And
experiences.
all my own bad, everything that will prevent me from having a good life.
Yeah.
And also I think it involves an opening and allowing within yourself to receive, not protection so much, but the teaching, like an opening of the mind. And that's at the heart, I think, body as well.
Well, it's really the first step, isn't it? Like the first step is to realize that we need to do something, isn't it? So the first step is to look at our own minds and see what's going on in there. You know, as Buddhist practitioners, or anybody who's not even a Buddhist practitioner but is just interested in some kind of mental development, first you have to get a sense of what is going on in your own mind. What are the positive qualities that you have? It's good to be honest about what positive qualities you have without having a sense of pride, but just seeing, you know, what's in there, and also seeing what are those negative attributes that you have. So things like, you know, anger, jealousy, pride, those kind of things. And thinking about how cause and effect works. You know, if I create a negative cause, if I engage in a negative action, what is the logical outcome of that? Understanding that cause and effect are, what do we say, infallible. So really looking within our own mind and seeing, okay, so what do I need to do in there? What do I need to fix within my own mind? So what I really need to do in order to just even have a happy life in this life, I need to reduce those negative parts that I have within my mind, like anger, like jealousy, like pride, like attachment. So I need to reduce those, and I need to encourage those positive ones, like loving kindness, like compassion, like the mind of enlightenment, like generosity, like ethics or morality. So with those kind of positive mental states, then even within this life, we create more happiness for ourselves. And for sure, thinking about the way that cause and effect is infallible, then we create the causes for future happiness in future lives as well. So that's really the first step, is to look within our own minds and see, actually, you know, our current situation is not really satisfactory. You know, the way we go through life, we're always looking for happiness. Sometimes we get a bit of happiness. A lot of the times we get suffering, isn't it? So how do we go about making our lives happier even just in this lifetime? We need to reduce the causes for the suffering and increase the causes for happiness. And that will work then for us in this lifetime, but also future lifetimes, which is our main thing we should be striving for. So it's really through first understanding our situation as it is now and seeing that it's not really satisfactory. There's something more that I could do to create better, like a better situation, internal and external situation for myself, that you then look for somebody who can actually teach you the methods to improve your own mind. So like you're saying, it's like an opening up in a sense. Once you realize that you need to do something, then you go for refuge to somebody who can teach you the methods to improve your own mind. But really, going for refuge to the Buddha is, like I was saying before, it's not just about, you know, save me, protect me, do something for me, you know, remove my suffering, remove my causes for suffering. It's not like that at all. It's really asking the Buddha, somebody who's already attained a state that is beyond any type of suffering, to teach the methods so that I can attain a state like your state. So that's really what going for refuge to the Buddha is about. And then we talk about going for refuge to the Dharma. So what is the Dharma?
Teachings.
The teachings like the spoken teachings or the books and things like that.
It's what the Buddha has produced. Ultimately, these teachings, which will then help us find a way out.
Mm-hmm. That's one part, like that's one way we can talk about the Dharma, the Dharma jewel. Is there another?
Protection as well.
It is protection. So how is it protection?
It's protection because it's telling us how to do it, basically.
Yep. So when we talk about like the teachings of the methods, so it's explaining the methods by which we escape from suffering.
So that those methods become part of us.
Yes. Yep. So what is the part that it becomes? Path. Path.
Of the path. Realization.
Realizations. Yes. Yep.
Well, I guess as part of what Lynn's saying, the realization, it's a whole conceptual shift that needs to be kind of washed through your mind in a way because of our current way of thinking and perceiving the world.
Yeah, that's right. So we need to change the way that we view things. We need to change our minds. Mm-hmm. We can say it in a really sort of pithy way. So the actual Dharma jewel is true paths and true cessations. Have you heard this before?
Sorry.
True paths and true cessations.
True path and true cessation.
So what you said before is correct. So it's like talking about path or realization. It's exactly what we're getting at. It's through developing, especially the true path within our own continuum. That's the way that we gain a true cessation, where you actually you've removed the causes for suffering. So the actual Dharma jewel is true paths and true cessations. All these, books that we read on Buddhist philosophy, the teachings that we listen to, they're like the relative Dharma jewel. So then the methods by which we can then develop the true paths and true cessations in our continuum. But that's like, when you will have heard that analogy given before of like, the Buddha is like the doctor and the Dharma is like the medicine. So the medicines, like the doctor, you need to give you the prescription saying this is what you need to do. But it's the actual medicine that you have to take. If you've got the prescription in your hand, and you wander around thinking, yeah, I'm going to get well because I've got the prescription in my hand, it's not going to do anything for you, is it? If you're sick, you need to actually go to the chemist and get the medicine and take the medicine. So the Dharma jewel is the actual medicine. It is what is actually going to free you from suffering, true paths and true cessations. When you bring them to their ultimate or their final consummate sort of state, then you attain the state of a Buddha. Yeah. Well, so if you're thinking about just your happiness in this life alone, then it's not Dharma, definitely. You have to at least be thinking about your own happiness in future lifetimes for whatever you do to be a Dharma practice. But if you can expand your motivation to encompass others as well, and then it's like a really expansive Dharma motivation, then your Dharma practice becomes like a practice of the Mahayana. So, because we've got these different streams within Buddhism, we've got the Hinayana, we've got the Mahayana. So the Hinayana is really focused on attaining your own goal of liberation. So not so much focused on what you can do for others, but looking really at what you can do for yourself to increase your happiness and to get rid of your suffering. So it may be that somebody subscribes to that view because they think that it's actually not possible to attain Buddhahood. There are some tenet systems within the Buddhist philosophy that hold that there will be some individuals that will attain Buddhahood, like Shakyamuni Buddha, for instance, but it's actually not possible for everybody to do that. So through tenets, they might hold to that view. There might be others who think, well, actually everybody can attain Buddhahood, but I think that's too difficult for me where I'm at right now. What I'll do is I'll first eliminate my own suffering and causes for suffering. And then when I've attained that state of liberation or nirvana, then I'll be in a better position to be able to help others. And then I'll enter into the Mahayana and, you know, go for Buddhahood from there. So people might have different motivations for entering into the Hinayana and just striving for their own attainment of, you know, cessation of suffering. So in Buddhism, we say that it's not like a bad thing to have that motivation. In fact, it's like still very, very good. And the kind of realizations that a Hinayana practitioner has to generate within their continuum are like amazing realizations. They still have to develop true paths and true cessations in their continuum. They still have to have this perceptual realization of emptiness and eliminate all those afflictive obscurations to attain the state of liberation, nirvana. So it's still a very amazing thing to do. It's just not as vast as the Mahayana. So then you're taking it to the next step and thinking, well, actually, it's not so nice for me to just work for my own benefit, you know, just to remove my own suffering, because look at all these other sentient beings that have been so kind to me. So for me to just work for my own benefit is a little bit rude, perhaps. So really, I need to have an expansive motivation where I'm striving to get rid of suffering, not just for myself, but for all sentient beings. So then that's the motivation of the Mahayana. So we say that, like, if you're striving for a happy future rebirth, or if you're for yourself, or you're striving for liberation, those are still quite sort of, you could say in a sense, self-centered goals, because they're just focused on your own happiness, not on the happiness of others. But that's not necessarily, we don't say that's necessarily a bad thing. The bad thing is when you focus on your own aims, but harm others in the process, are indifferent, you know, sort of, don't mind if you harm others in the process of achieving those goals. So that would be a type of bad self-centered or self-cherishing motivation. So it's not going to be Dharma if you're just focused on happiness of this life. But if you're focused on happiness for future lives, for yourself, or liberation, it's still a Dharma practice. It's just not the best motivation you can have. Yeah.
So, I mean, I have a bit of trouble with this thing about focusing on future lives, because I will always think, well, I can only do what I can do in this moment, here and now, and that's just going to have to take care of itself. So it doesn't do much for me. I mean, it probably should, but it doesn't.
It doesn't inspire you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Because you are looking for happiness now, or what's?
It's like making bread, you know, like I can only make this much bread. There's no point thinking about the loaves I might make in the future. I'm much better to stay focused here on making this one.
So could you make the loaf of bread, but just not for the sake of you eating it now? Could you not turn it, with your motivation, turn it into a vaster practice? Like, for instance, if you're making a loaf of bread, if in that process, so you're thinking, I'm making a loaf of bread because I want to eat some bread, you know, and I like my bread better than the bread that I buy from the store, so I'd rather make it myself.
It's more like this is what's happening now. Like, it's not even like I'm not even making the loaf of bread for myself. It's like, in this moment, this is what appears to me to be the thing to do.
Can't you link it with your thinking about karma?
Well, I'm just trying to actually link it with a wider perspective at the moment.
Well, I suppose, you know, so when you make the bread, when you're actually making the bread, whether you're making it for yourself to eat or you're making it for someone else to eat, at the time when you're making the bread, you're not enjoying the bread. The other person isn't enjoying the bread, are they?
No.
At that very moment. So that's something that's yet to come.
Yeah. True.
And yet you're doing this activity right in the here and now, and you're not experiencing the result right in that here and now.
Mm.
So the result will come sometime down the track, maybe like the end of the day, because there's a bit of time when you're making bread and it's got to rise. I think my mum spends like 3 days something making sourdough bread. So the result is going to come down 3 days down the track once she's done all the rising. I don't understand how it works, but yeah. So you've got in your mind that this idea of cause and result, even though you're not thinking about it, but you have the understanding that this is the result that will come from this cause, what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I get that. But for me, like if we take it back to just say getting angry, right? All I can focus on right now is being aware enough not to get caught in that. And that seems more in the moment.
Mm-hmm. In the moment, for sure. I mean, I did like the analogy with the bread. I feel like we could have explored this further. Because it would just, let's go back to the bread for a second. So, you know, you're thinking, okay, I can only really cope with dealing with making this bread right now. You know, I can only cope with what's going on in the moment. But when you think about it, you're not actually, you're already thinking about the future, what's going to happen. When you're making the bread, you're already thinking about the future.
Yeah, and when I'm not getting angry, I'm thinking this is gonna be better for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is, you, even though you might not explicitly be thinking about it at the time, you have this underlying understanding of cause and result present and what will happen in the future based on your current actions. So it's a matter then of just expanding it a bit further, you know. So for instance, when you're making the bread, I mean, it's a very mundane activity, isn't it? So in a sense, it actually gives you opportunity to do something more with that activity. So you can think, well, while you're making the bread, why leave it at just being like this cause and result thing? Why can't you also think, well, while you're making the bread, it's like, I'm making it for this friend of mine, but there are many people in the world who don't have the opportunity to get a loaf of bread like this. They struggle to get even like a really poor type of loaf of bread. So, you know, I'm making this loaf now for my friend, but actually in the future, may I be able to make loaves of bread or sustain all sentient beings in this way? You know, make your motivation vaster so that you don't have to necessarily be thinking about future lives specifically, but at least make your motivation vaster so that you're thinking, instead of just making it for this one person, may I in the future through this be able to sustain all sentient beings? Thinking about the suffering that beings experience currently from not having sustenance. You know, there's no sort of, how can I say, there's no loss to you to think like that. And there's a great benefit to think like that. So you might think like, I can't deal with, you know, adding anything else in on the top of my activities that I'm doing right now. It's too much to think about. But actually, it's not that much. And the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. You know, Shanti Davis says, there is nothing that does not get easier with familiarity. So it's only difficult for us to have these vast motivations because we're not familiar with them.
Well, that's what I'm thinking, really connected to how I view myself. In the sense of what's in terms of bread.
Yeah, no, we've all got greater potential than what we actually think that we do. We've very much locked ourselves into like this very small way of thinking about ourselves. We have this vast potential within ourselves to attain these amazing states, these amazing realizations on the path. Like I was saying, true paths and true cessations. We have that potential to develop the Dharma jewel within ourselves. Because we have a mind, I mean, basically, because we have our mind and because the mind lacks inherent existence, so it's able to change, because of those two factors, we can develop these amazing realizations. We can attain the state of a Buddha when we can make bread for all sentient beings in one moment, you know, in one single moment, you'll be able to do it for everybody effortlessly. We have that capacity within ourselves to develop those kind of states. But we've kind of very much locked ourselves into this narrow way of thinking about ourselves. And the only way to expand beyond that is to just gradually train our minds So starting with small things, like I was saying with the bread, making the motivation go beyond this very small motivation of, you know, having some bread to eat or having some bread to give to a friend, expanding it to see, can I expand it so that I'm thinking of all sentient beings when I'm doing that? And if you think about it like that, you know, and you're really expanding your motivation, essentially what you're saying is, can I develop those realizations where I'm able to give sustenance to all sentient beings? These are very high realizations to be able to do that. So that's what you're aiming for, even though you're not using the words. You're not saying, may I become an 8th level bodhisattva, for instance, or may I become a Buddha. But that's essentially what you're aspiring towards with that motivation. And so there's going to be a positive result. There'll be several positive results from that. So there'll be positive results in terms of like that, the karma that you place in your continuum, that will give rise to a positive result in this life or future lives. It'll also be the positive result that comes from familiarizing your mind. So that habituation with mind is being so essential so that you can continue on with improving your mind in that way in this life and in future lifetimes, lays those imprints. And it just makes your mind happier in this lifetime, even though that's not why you're doing it, but it does. I think, did Gensundru say last night, you know, His Holiness was saying, you know, if you're going to be selfish, be wisely selfish. And being wisely selfish is actually about putting others before yourself. You're the one who actually gains the benefit quickest from putting others before yourself, practicing cherishing others. Yeah. So you might be, you know, thinking, I can only focus on this, but you can do more. Definitely you can do more. You can, you know, and it's just a matter of familiarizing and allowing you that opportunity, that potential to grow within you.
It also feels very connected.
If you expand your motivation like that, as it should. Yes, as it should. Our happiness is dependent on other sentient beings. Really, we think that we're independent of others, but it's not the case. Just even in our day-to-day lives, you know, all the things that we use in our day-to-day lives all come from the kindness of other sentient beings, because other sentient beings have done all these things like grow the cotton. I was just looking at my robe thinking, I don't know that there's much cotton in here. It's a lot of polyester, but in any case, there's cotton in there somewhere. Somebody's, you know, grown the cotton. There have been all the bugs in the earth that have created, you know, helped to create this fertile earth that allowed the cotton plants to grow. Somebody's picked the cotton, whether with a machine or by hand. You know, then there's been the whole process of it going through the factories, the dyes and everything. And then people have put it together in I don't know, what do you say, a clothing factory machine, like a loom. I don't know what they use these days anyway. You know, they create the material. A loom, yeah. So they create the material on the loom, and then, you know, somebody sews it, and then, okay, it's sewn, but then it has to also be transported. So there's all the people involved in transportation going around the world. I mean, there's so many people involved in just the production of one piece of cotton clothing. So that's just like one thing. If you imagine, like, if we had to live our lives in a way that we were doing everything from scratch, I mean, you wouldn't be able to do it, for starters. And you could maybe grow some of your own food, but you wouldn't be able to grow like the extensive things that we partake of. You know, you go to the supermarket, there's all that stuff there that you can buy. You'd be getting like sort of the bare minimum if you had to grow your own stuff. And you wouldn't have very much time for doing anything else, like studying, for instance. So it's really due to the kindness of all these beings that provide these facilities, buildings for us to live in, for us to study in, that give us the time and the opportunity to actually study and practice Dharma. So it's like our happiness in that sense relies on so many beings, But also our own mental development relies on sentient beings, because you can't, for instance, practice generosity without having people to want to give to. When you think about practicing ethics, so ethics is refraining from harm, really. Basically, when it comes down to it, it's guarding the mind, it's refraining from harm towards sentient beings. So how do you do that if there are no sentient beings to refrain from harm with respect to you? Or patience. I mean, when it comes to patience, we cannot practice patience without other beings. It's impossible, especially we can't practice patience without enemies. We can prepare for practicing patience, but we can't actually put it into practice without those people who try to harm us. So, you know, that's just a few mental qualities. Compassion. How can you have compassion for sentient beings without sentient beings? You can't do it. And yet compassion and loving kindness, which are based on, you know, looking at sentient beings and wanting them to be free from suffering and have happiness, those are mental states that make our own mind very, very peaceful, very happy. I mean, you can have that disturbance of mind when you think about the suffering of sentient beings. But overall, when you look at compassion and loving kindness, cultivating them together, those are states of mind that bring about, you know, great peace and joy of mind, being able to help sentient beings, wishing to help sentient beings, rather than things like anger and jealousy, which are very disturbed states of mind that would seek to harm sentient beings. So sentient beings are extremely kind to us in that they act as a basis for us developing these excellent states of mind that benefit ourselves. Why was I talking about this? I don't remember. Asked a question. I can't remember now. Yes. Oh, you were saying you feel very connected, right?
Well, I was just thinking from all those things that we're connected. If we all focused on that, we'd all be very happy. But we take it so much for granted.
Well, yep. And self-cherishing comes in.
Yeah. And it's lovely to feel that.
Exactly. It's lovely to feel that. And it's really due to sentient beings that you can feel that. Sentient beings are
when I
amazing.
first met the Dharma, I really still feel that. Because I said to myself, okay, they're helping by doing all these things and making it possible. But I paid for that. And once I paid for it, I've covered my debt, as it were. And it's got nothing more to do. It's not that that person's kind to me at all. And it took me years to go.
Yeah.
I think having children really helps,
Oh, yes.
because you really identify with your own child and think, can't bear to see them in this state, and I'm just not helping them. You think, what can I do to help them?
Mm-hmm.
All you can do is use the Dharma as much as you can and think, well, in the future, I might be able to help.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
very hard when you've got children sometimes, and it's a real learning.
But it seems to be the thing, like one of the ways, and a great way to be able to develop that kind of selfless love, you know, really putting someone before yourself in that sense. And using, if you can use that as a basis to then apply it towards.
What was the example of the woman or their child falling in the water or something? Got the detail.
Yeah. Is that an example of you could jump in the water with the child, or you need to get to the bank yourself so that you can.
No, it's to save the child. She didn't matter that she wanted to kill herself. I can't remember what I thought that was the thing with compassion, that you feel it so strongly. Everything else goes out the door. You save your child.
Yeah.
And if you then can transfer that into other people, you think, well, that's somebody else's child.
Yes. Well, it was very interesting to me actually one time when I was in Sydney with a friend of mine. We were at His Holiness's teachings, and because, you know, I haven't had my own children, and I was still, I think, kind of young. I was a nun at that point, but I was probably in my 20s, I would say. And so when you're in your 20s, when you're in your teens and your 20s, you don't really think about the kindness of parents, I think, you know. You're very much focused on your own aims, you know, what I want out of life, what's going to make me happy is the most important thing. And so you don't really think about it. And I remember, so I was in Sydney and we were staying with her aunt and uncle, and they had two children that were like sort of, I think maybe early teens, I guess. So they were very much in that zone of helping others, you know, because helping their kids. And because my friend was their niece, then they extended that also out to her. And because I was her friend, then they extended it out to me as well. And I remember we ended up in this kind of, I don't know how we ended up in this situation where we had somebody else's suitcase and it was really heavy. And we would have had to go on like 3 buses to get back to the house where we were staying, the aunt and uncle. And she rang up her aunt and uncle. And they came out like through Sydney traffic all the way. I think it was like somewhere over near Bondi. And they had to come into the centre of the city to pick up us with this really heavy suitcase. And I thought, that's amazing, you know. It's like so amazing that someone would do that, because they weren't related to me, you know, and yet they would just show that great kindness. And it made me think, yeah, I think when you have children, it must really change your approach towards helping people or really who are related to you. But and if you can extend that to others, it's even better, isn't it? It's like not thinking about the difficulty to myself, having to go through all that traffic to get these 2 nuns with a heavy suitcase. They just did it without a thought. Yeah. And I thought, yeah, that's amazing. So that's like, if you can use that as a basis and extend it out. Yeah. But I think, Len, what you were saying before is like, you know, you feel like you've spent your money and so therefore the debt is dispelled. Yeah. But it's kind of like, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. I was going to say something before it came to my mind. Now it's just gone out of my mind again. Hang on, it will come back to my mind. But then if we think beyond that, it's like it's not to do with the motivation of the people that are helping us. Like, you know, for instance, our enemies, when they harm us and give us that opportunity to actually put into practice the patience that we've been preparing for. So you do all the work for the patience before you get angry, isn't it? Before you encounter somebody who's going to give you problems. And then they actually come up and they try and do some harm to you. And that's the point at which you actually put your patience into practice. You actually get to see whether you can, you know, use your mind, transform your mind well enough that you're not going to get disturbed. And through that, if you're successful, then you have this like absolute treasure of having an undisturbed mind in the face of hardship. And that creates like that helps you temporarily, and also it helps you in the future, doesn't it? It's like what they say, patience is the greatest austerity or something. Anyway, so that person who is going to harm you, they didn't have the intention to help you. And yet they've helped you. They've helped you create the causes for future happiness. They've helped you to see how well your practice of patience, your practice of mind transformation is going. They didn't have the intention to, in fact, they had the intention to harm you, unless, of course, they're a Buddha manifesting just for your benefit. But, you know, which is helpful to think about it that way. But, you know, it's probably not the case that everybody out there is a Buddha who's trying to help us through creating some problems for us. They had the intention to harm you, let's say, right? And yet that person is extremely kind. So a person being kind or being kind to us really doesn't have anything to do with their motivation. It's to do with whether there's a benefit that we get from their action, isn't it? So although when you think about it, somebody, you know, a whole stream of people created this one garment that you went into the shop and paid some money for and you bought it. So they didn't have the intention necessarily to help you. Probably their main intention was to have money for them to live themselves. Maybe some of them, possibly, and especially these days, you can think they were probably enslaved, perhaps enslaved to create the garment. Maybe they didn't have a choice. They were trying to avoid suffering for themselves. So in any case, probably their motivation was not specifically to help others. It was probably a, you know, self-centered motivation. But that does not negate the benefit that we get from that. Like the temporary benefit of having the piece of clothing, but also that having this piece of clothing and other pieces of clothing frees up our time so that we can do these other things with our time. Gives us the opportunity to come to teachings, to, you know, do your practice at home, whatever it is, to develop your own mind. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah. So it's great if we can feel connected to beings. Yes. And like what you were saying, Felicity, with when you have a child, you know, it's like trying to extend that love that you have, that unconditional love you have to your child towards all other beings. I thought also, you know, when my own father passed away, which was like about 3 years ago, and it occurred to me only really once he'd passed away, and I thought, well, actually, anybody, you know, anybody could be the reincarnation of my father. I don't know when I'm going to come across him. And it just made me think, it sort of brought it home to me more directly, that whole idea of, you know, all sentient beings have been our mothers, been my mother. But it's only really once my own father had died that it kind of really made me have a bit more of a sense of it in a deeper way, I suppose. Because I was like, yeah, he's gone. He could be anybody. Yeah. So anyway, so going back to the prayer that we recite before teachings, so we say, you know, I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, and go for refuge to the Sangha. So going for refuge to the Dharma is really about doing what we can to develop true paths and true cessations in our own continuum. That's what it really means to go for refuge to the Dharma. So these listening to teachings and reading books, these are like, I suppose, methods for accomplishing that. But actually, going for refuge means to try to develop those in our continuum. Yeah. And then going for refuge to the Sangha. So what are the Sangha? Do you remember?
Those that can help us.
Yeah, they're like the nurses, aren't they? That's the analogy. They're like a nurse.
Others who are aspiring to what in the way that we want to aspire towards saving others, or it's in Buddhism, and we have, like, not necessarily people who've taken roles, but there are many amazing people around who can help us in Buddhism. The same levels.
Yeah, like they're people that, or the beings that we emulate their example, isn't it? Specifically, when we talk about like the Sangha jewel, the main one in there, we're talking about those Arya beings. So those beings who've already attained or developed the Dharma jewel within their continuum. They already have true paths and true cessations within their continuum. So it's about, when we go for refuge to the Sangha, it's about emulating them, because we want to achieve the kind of state that they've achieved. So when we recite these 2 lines here, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. They're 2 lines, but actually to really go for refuge, there's quite a lot to unpack within those 2 lines, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, I just thought talk a little bit about that. Okay. So what we've been talking about then, or what we were talking about last week, is about developing altruism. So it's basically developing about this, developing a cherishing of others and developing a mind of enlightenment. So like we've just discussed now, there's like a temporary benefit for us. So there's this benefit in terms of like our minds will become happier and peaceful, and also will create the causes for future happiness. But there's this long-term benefit of attaining enlightenment. We develop a cherishing of others. So that's, you know, I suppose these are some of the benefits of developing a cherishing of others, or altruism. So currently what we have, I'm feeling a little bit warm. Do you reckon we could turn down? What about you guys? Are you feeling a little toasty? Yeah.
Those guys walk down.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite toasty last night, wasn't it? I feel like I might have overdressed for the day. Oh well. Yes, so what we want to do when we're developing this altruism, or this cherishing of others, what we're wanting to do first off is we need to decrease our afflictive emotions. So in fact, you could say we kind of have to have like a 2-pronged attack at our mind. Maybe I'll write some. Yes, that's also, that was the part of my motivation. need some air. I talked about before, going for a particular Dharma is about developing true paths and true cessation in the mind. So that's something that's like a longer term goal we're working towards. But what we need to do, and this is in our practice of cherishing others or developing altruism, is we need to, like I was saying, reduce our afflictions. So we need to reduce things like anger, attachment, pride, jealousy, etc. And we need to increase loving kindness, compassion, and those kind of positive emotions. So the thing with our afflictive emotions, our negative emotions, attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, these are all the things that kind of really feed into our self-cherishing mind. So what happens when we develop those kind of afflictive emotions is, first we kind of have this really strong sense of there being like there's this concrete me here, this really strong sense of there being a solid me. And that solid me is sometimes helped and sometimes it's harmed. So because we have this really strong grasping to there being this concrete solid me here, then when somebody comes along to try and seems to help that concrete solid me, then we pull that person closer, don't we? And when somebody comes along and tries to harm that concrete solid me, then we like to push them away. So we have this craving to have happiness, and we have also a craving to be separated from suffering. And so then what happens is that we develop attachment towards those things and those beings that we think are helping us, and we develop this aversion and anger, ill will towards those that we see as being harming this concrete solid me. So there's two things that we need to do here. So this sense of having a concrete solid me, that's really a type of, it's a self-grasping. Do you guys know about, I mean, I don't know how much you guys have studied, I know Felicity, you've done a lot of study. But the rest of you, have you done quite a bit of study of these types of things? Yeah, an idea, not so much? Okay. So we say that the root of all our afflictive emotions, so all of our afflictive emotions is this self-grasping that grasps. So it sees that, it grasps there to be this I. There is an I, isn't there? There is a me, there is a person. There is a person that's, like there's this me here that's now talking about Dharma stuff. There's yous over there. You're all eyes. You're all your individual eyes, and you're listening to what I'm saying and having a bit of a discussion. So there are eyes, there are persons, there are selves. That's okay. The problem is that we have this ignorance that grasps that I, that person, to exist in a way that it doesn't actually exist. Sees it being something concrete, independent. There is some I here that exists within the body of the mind. And it's due to that self-grasping that then we have this really strong sense of need to protect. We need to protect this I. We take for granted that actually the I is independent, that it does exist somewhere here in this body and mind. And because of that we take for granted that that's how it exists, then we seek to protect that. We try and bring more happiness to that. We try and push away suffering. And so what that leads to attachment, leads to anger, leads to pride. So all these other afflictions all come about independence upon that self-grasping, that grasps there to be an independent, inherently existent I. So there's two ways we can go about attacking this issue that we have in our minds. So one is we can try and get rid of this, try and eliminate the self-grasping, or
and, I should say and also, and or, we can work at decreasing these ones. So the one at the root is this self-grasping. That's the one that causes all of the problems. It needs to go, but it is also quite hard to eliminate. And then we've got these ones that tend to come and go within our minds. So these ones, we need to apply individual antidotes to each of them. So like, for instance, with anger, the antidote to that would be loving kindness. For example, pride, looking at the qualities of others, seeing your own faults, that would be very good. Reducing pride. Attachment, there's a lot of different ways to go about reducing your attachment, but it depends on the object of your attachment. They say non-attachment is the antidote, but requires a bit of discussion. So we kind of need to have a two-pronged attack with respect to what's going on in our mind. We need to try and analyse the way that the self exists, but also we need to develop these antidotes to the specific negative emotions in our own life. So when we first talk about developing this cherishing of others or the mind of enlightenment, our first real step is actually to develop equanimity. Is this something that Checky's talked about? She has?
I'm going to say yes, whether she's done a specific class just on equanimity.
Yeah, okay. So equanimity is really important at the outset of our practice on developing this altruism or cherishing of others, the mind of enlightenment. It's very important because without equanimity, without a balanced attitude towards all beings, then we have a very biased attitude. So we'll be biased towards those that help us, and we'll be biased away from those that harm us. So then what happens is that you have like quite good loving kindness towards those that are your friends, and you don't have much loving kindness towards those that are your enemies. So at the outset, what's most important is that we develop this equanimity. We should see what His Holiness has to say about this, actually. Let's have a look. Do we have the books? Or no copies?
We have a few copies. Distribute.
Which one? Kindness, Clarity and Insight.
It is available.
As an ebook, okay.
It's not quite advanced.
Equanimity?
Yeah.
I would say equanimity is like the foundation.
Well, this is what, you know, my mind is sort of good. But you know the parameters. What's the first one? Generosity,
Mm-hmm.
ethics, concentration, patience.
Choice effort. Oh, yeah, patience, choice effort.
Don't you get sort of, I mean, I know you're supposed to practice them all at once, don't you sort of have to get some taste of all the other ones before you can start getting through the accepting about things? What the act. I don't want to lead us off onto a
No, that's fine. I'm not sure I understand your question though.
It's really, I suppose it's more of a wondering. It's like, to me, equanimity seems to be quite an advanced sort of response and state. How you might respond to yourself and to life, like with compassion and all these other perspectives. But you say, well, actually, you need this.
Yes.
Yeah, so well, this is interesting. See how this.
Well, okay. So when I say it's important as a foundation in the beginning, it's because specifically in terms of the practice that we're talking about. So I'm just going to start. Let's just start talking about it, shall we?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was kind of leading into with this whole discussion is because I've got quite a lot to cover within like 4 weeks, and 1 week is already gone. So talking about altruism and perfection, essentially what we're talking about is developing the mind of enlightenment. And then for the mind of enlightenment, which is, if you remember last week, we talked about it's that mind that strives for the sake, to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So the sake of all sentient beings is your motivation or your cause for it. And the mind of enlightenment is what then really starts to propel you towards the goal, which is Buddhahood. And then, having developed the mind of enlightenment, you actually have to engage in the activities that are going to get you to enlightenment. That's what we talked about. So first you have to develop this aspiration. Welfare, we just have to sake of others. Then you develop the aspiration. Then engage in the activities or the conduct lead to the goal, which is Buddhahood. So that's the order in which you do it. So the reason why I'm saying equanimity is at the foundation is because in order to achieve this goal, you necessarily, the goal of enlightenment, then you necessarily have to engage in activities. All the activities or the conduct is all things that you do for sentient beings, basically. It's all activities that are focused on doing things for sentient beings with the idea that you're going to get to Buddhahood. But in order to do that, you have to have this aspiration, in order to engage in those activities that are going to lead to the goal, which is like you're saying, generosity, patience, joyous effort, ethics, all those things, those are the kind of activities. In order to do that, then you have to have this aspiration that strives for enlightenment, that's your motivation. In order to have that properly qualified, a proper version of it in your continuum, you have to have this aspiration that strives for others' welfare, seeks to benefit other sentient beings. You have to have that. It's essential. In order to develop that, right at the very start, that's what I'm saying. It's the foundation. So what are they doing? So if we break these down even further, because who doesn't love clarity? I do. Okay, so if we break these down even further, how do we go about developing this? If we go from the start. So to develop that aspiration that strives for the welfare of others, there are two methods you can go about developing that. Do you know the two methods? Jackie will have mentioned this for sure. Well, bodhicitta you get here. In the second stage.
The two together get you ultimately to
enlightenment. Well, so this is the interesting thing when you break it down. So we talk about them. Sorry, Len, you were going to say something?
Well, the methods for developing very achievable.
Yep.
There's 7 courses and 6 courses.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is, okay, methods of teachers. There are 5 steps you can take, starting with the welfare of others.
You're thinking of exchanging self and other?
Exchanging self.
Yeah, Shanti. Yeah, so there are these 2 methods by which you can say the 2 methods for generating aspiration that strives for enlightenment. That's the result of either of the methods, is this aspiration that strives for enlightenment. The 2 methods are like really talking about what happens, how you go about developing this aspiration that strives for enlightenment. So there are 2 ways you can go about it. The way that His Holiness mentions in this book that we're using with our daisies, very much. He talks about this 7-fold cause and effect instruction. So, to develop this aspiration that strives for the welfare of others, we follow along with this 7-fold cause and effect instruction. Within that, so with this one here, we've got 7 steps, obviously. So, recognizing sentient things. It's just in Tibetan, it's just framed as recognizing others. Recollecting kindness. You remember the 3rd one? Because what is one? Yeah, we can do it. What's next? Yeah, loving kindness usually comes first. And it's technically called affectionate loving kindness. And then we have compassion. And what's the next one? Number 6.
The universal compassion. The superior.
Yeah, I tend to call it the highest intention, so I'll use that to manage it. Use that please. Okay, so we've got 6 steps here. So recognizing sending things being the mother, so through understanding the mental continuum. So for this, it's actually quite a difficult step because you have to understand. Oh, sorry. So you need to understand mind. You need to understand the central continuum of mind. That mind has to arise from a concordant cause. It can't arise from something that's made from instance. So understanding past and future lives and then recognizing things. Recollecting their kindness, wishing to repay that kindness, affectionate loving kindness, compassion, and the highest intention. All of these 6 steps are causes for generating the aspiration that strives for enlightenment. I feel like maybe I've lost you a little bit with this presentation. No, it's okay. We talked last week about the mind of enlightenment has 2 aspirations. This process, these 6 steps, are the process by which you generate aspiration that strives for others' welfare. And when you've attained that highest intention, essentially the highest intention is the aspiration that strives for others.
So that's the ground.
Well, this is the ground, but before that, before you can have this turn out well at the start, you need equanimity. That's what I'm saying.
I think maybe I don't know what equanimity is.
This is possible. There's different explanations of equanimity. Here, equanimity is referring to an equanimous, having an equanimous attitude towards friend and administrator. So it's about a balanced attitude, say. So not having attachment to friends, anger to enemies, and indifference towards strangers. Which means not to say that then you have the same kind of like indifferent attitude towards all things. That's not what it's talking about. In fact, really through developing proper equanimity, we should have like a concern, care for all sentient beings. That should be the result of that meditation. Yeah. So what it's really talking about is through understanding. So like you could for example, say, currently in our life, we think our friends are people that help us, that give us happiness. Our enemies are those that harm us and give us suffering. So it's, it's appropriate that I draw my friends close, and it's appropriate that I push my enemies away. But when you think about it logically, in actual fact, when you think about it just in this lifetime alone, everybody started off as a stranger. It's not like you came into life and automatically you knew who was this person who's going to be your best friend when you were 15, or this terrible work manager you had at the age of 33, and so from when you were born, there was this person out there who was going to be a terrible work manager at the age of 33, and they were from that very moment you were born, they were your enemy. It's not like that, is it? People become your friend or become your enemy gradually through life due to various causes and conditions. And part of that is maybe something that they do. There's a little bit coming from their side. Maybe they do something. Most of it comes from our side. So it's the way we might interpret other people's actions. Or it might be that we focus only on their negative attributes and we don't think at all about their positive qualities. So that's something that's a fault from our side. Then also, when you think about it, like if you can think about it in terms of past and future lifetimes, then past lifetimes like beginningless. So in past lifetimes, that person who's currently your worst enemy was at some point your closest friend. The person who's your closest friend in this lifetime was your worst enemy in probably many lifetimes. Having our own self-centered, self-cherishing mind that we have now, if we could remember all our past lifetimes, we probably wouldn't be able to be friends with anyone. Because you just see, because how we are currently is we tend to see all the little negative bits and blow them up into this massive thing. So, that person's absolutely awful, in spite of the fact that they've probably got lots of friends themselves. They're probably very loving towards their family, got people who love them, but because of this little thing that they did to us at this point, that thing that they said about us, they're a terrible person. That's an awful person. And we just kind of like completely, paint the brush of negative all over them.
What you said was really very helpful about the person talking about
Yes. Yep. I mean, to have this kind of a life is amazing. So that doesn't come from nothing. It definitely comes from having accumulated the causes for it. Yes. And then thinking about how, I think I mentioned it last week, how everybody has that potential for amazing realizations in their own continuum. Like if all these people that we currently can't stand, if they were to train their own minds and develop, like I was saying before, true path and true cessations, if they would be able to get rid of their own suffering, if they would be able to develop a mind of enlightenment themselves, if they were to become a bodhisattva, would you still not want to be around them? You'd be following them around, wouldn't you? Like, you don't want to be separated from that person. And all these beings, even our enemies, have the capacity to do that, and they will do it eventually in their own continuum. All sentient beings eventually will become Buddhists. Probably even, there'll be some enemies that will achieve these states well before we do. Yeah. So, but all of this stuff, we don't see that like long-term perspective. We don't think about past and future lives. We don't see how we just focus on these small negativities or these small benefits. And, we don't see that in our own minds. And we think that actually that person is an enemy from their side. So that person's a friend from their side. All these other people are like strangers. So what we need to do is we need to like even out that attitude, develop equanimity. So thinking about, how these categories are not definite, that, people will change from being friend to being enemy and so forth. Even throughout our lifetime and through beginningless lifetimes, they definitely change. So there's no real benefit, there's no point, there's no logic behind holding some to be a friend and some to be an enemy, in of themselves. So through thinking like this, then we can reduce that imbalance we have and develop the community. So that's why equanimity is very important. Does that make more sense for your understanding?
Yeah, because to do all these other things, you've got to have that attitude to start with.
Yes, because if you don't have that at the start, and you still have that great bias towards your friends and disliking your enemies, then all these other stages that come afterwards are not going to be equal towards all sentient. And what you're striving to develop is that wish. So here we're talking about that highest intention, that wish, or that sense of responsibility towards all sentient beings, to free them all from suffering. And that needs to be equal towards all sentient beings. If you leave one out, that person who's your worst enemy in this life, if you leave them out, there is no way you can then go on and develop a mind that strives for them.
When I think about equanimity and opportunities to practice and to really look at where to practice is often in workplaces and in those really complex situations, then generally with people you don't choose to be around because you just happen to work with them. And that's just really, because if I think of, if I can think of someone whose behaviour is troublesome or problematic or not great or on the let's face it, on the negative end of the spectrum, but if I can still see that, their mind is like mine, but I still have to deal with this aspect, and I find that challenging. I can still see that this person is just like me, wants to be happy and wants to be free of suffering. However, their behaviour is what I have to work on a day-to-day. And that's the bit that sometimes I think it overrides, and it just, there's still that reality of having that. And that's just,
it is hard, and it only gets easier with familiarity. Yeah. Because in the moment when somebody's giving you a hard time, or just like doing things that are just in mind, there's no benefit to you, there's no benefit to me, that happens, then it's very hard to maintain that sense of, compassion and understanding of what's going on with them, unless you've done like a lot of work before that point. Yeah, I think what you're saying though is spot on, how you're trying to divide the person from their behaviour. Because it's really, our anger comes very strongly when you conflate the two. You see that person, is wrong because, or that person's terrible because their behaviour is terrible. The person themselves is not, you can say conventionally that's quite a bad person because their activities are bad. But when we're trying to practice compassion and trying to practice loving kindness, then we really do need to separate that two. They know that behaviour is totally inappropriate, but the person is still worthy of my compassion. Yeah. And then when you have that, if you're able to maintain that in the actual moment, you actually have more sort of resources at your disposal, of how to respond as well. Because if your motivation is compassion, then you can choose, do I need to say something quite forceful to the person in this moment? Do I need to say something that's quite pacifying to the person in this moment? If you have a motivation of compassion, you can use those different techniques. Whereas if you have a motivation of anger, then whatever you do is going to be motivated by anger. Probably end up being a negative action.
Yeah, I find that with some people, even though the motivation is compassion, the best action I have is quiet.
Yeah.
It is probably is to refrain from saying, to be there, rather than respond in any way. That's the best I have at that time, is just sort of become an observer rather than engaging.
Yes, I think you're probably not alone with that. Yeah. I mean, at least if you can't do something to fix the situation, or change the situation, there's actually no benefit to trying to say something.
No, and in fact, it's probably beneficial because then I'm not responding out of any kind of anger or frustration, or it's more about practicing my behaviours rather than talking in terms of study. It's more of the diminishing rather than.
I mean, I think you have to like think about what's suitable for the context, isn't it? There are occasions when if somebody's behaving very badly, that you actually do need to step in and do something, because they may be harming themselves, they may be harming others, even apart from you, in which case it is important. But then it's important to make sure that your motivation is compassionate. I think it's very difficult. You know, it's a question that a lot of people ask, and you can never say for sure in a particular situation that you should behave like this, you should behave like that. It really depends on context. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So does it make sense now as to why?
Yeah, I'm just thinking now, well, where are we before equanimity or in pain, suffering, and influence?
Yeah, that sums it up. I mean, I suppose you can say it's like, you've got a choice. You can keep going as you are, or you can do something different. So
So you're telling me, sorry, these are all the levels of difference that you can incorporate and work from wherever you can.
well, this is a particular process that you can go
Yeah.
to get to a very exalted type of experience where you have this wish to not just like may all sentient beings be free from suffering, but may I free them from suffering. This is this highest intention. That's what it does. It's that kind of awareness that takes on the responsibility of freeing sentient beings from suffering. So this is a process by which you can develop that. Yeah. So you can like meditate on compassion, you can meditate on loving kindness in and of themselves, but unless they're preceded by equanimity and these stages that come before, you won't develop that exalted type of awareness that actually, you know, takes on the responsibility of wanting to free sentient beings from suffering. Because you won't have that unbiased attitude that allows you to have a wish that is equal towards God. I think that's the thought transformation. I feel like that's got a lot of different points in there. I can't bring, I don't know what it means, so I have to look at it and stuff. How does it go? Has anybody got memorized?
I used to go for them.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Yeah, we'd have to look at the text. I don't want to use that. I'll just see it at the time.
In what I remember from that is give the wings to the others. That's
my
my
knowledge.
With what? With the
Give them the other.
Yeah, the victory.
And so
Yeah.
give the teacher to the others, see yourself as well as,
Yeah. Okay, so
This is really helpful. to
Okay.
me in terms of some kind of plan, you know, like or possibility, or
Yeah.
like you're talking about,
Mhm.
potential. But actually, there's an order.
Oh yeah, the Buddha's amazing. He really gave us like a plan. He gave us an excellent plan. We just have to follow it. You know, if we follow it correctly, then we'll end up with the result. If we follow it incorrectly or out of order, we won't end up with the correct result. So this is the plan. Yeah, this is the plan we need to follow. So there's actually quite a lot of work that needs to be done, isn't there? There's a lot of work, but like I was saying before, it's like basically we have this choice. So either we can choose to keep going about life as we have been, which is, you know, buffeted by our afflictions. If our anger says, no, we don't like this person, then we can be quite mean to that person. or our attachment says, yeah, this person's a really nice person, I hold them close, and then we have an attachment, we're quite nice to them until they do something that we don't like, and then we have anger towards them, because that's the way that attachment and anger work, is anger sits in behind attachment, and attachment, you know, exaggerates. So if there's rosy colored glasses, that person's amazing, they're so wonderful, they're fantastic, and then something happens that doesn't accord with those rose-colored glasses, and you take the rose-colored glasses off and you start to see the person for how they are, you know, an ordinary sentient being with problems and faults of their own. And you don't just leave it at that and go, oh, that poor person. No, you go, oh no, that person's really awful now. They've been so mean to me. They were my friend and now they're so awful. And so anger comes in, doesn't it? And this is how we've lived our lives until now. This is how we lived beginningless lives until now, is just going along with whatever the afflictions tell us, going here and there and wherever. So we can keep doing that, or we can try this.
Thinking of this analogy now of a master musician, right? And all the practice that you have to do, you know, just on the really basic stuff before you even write something. And if you think, well, I don't like that note, or that note, you're not going to be, well, I've only got this little bit of tune here. It's not going to help you much. So it's nice because there's more clarity and more openness to, well, yeah, if you put yourself, I don't know, 10,000 hours, perhaps you put a little bit, maybe one day,
Well, definitely. If you put these things into practice in the correct order, there will definitely be both an immediate benefit and a long-term benefit. There's no doubt about it.
I don't think I've had that challenge to maybe working on bits and pieces.
Well, here's your plan.
Thank you. Take a photo.
Okay, well, our time is up for today. So we can keep talking about these things next week. As I said, I mean, there's like so much information. It's quite hard to cover all of it within 4 weeks. But anyway, we'll do like sort of a general overview of these points. And if you have questions, just, I'm happy for you to ask them at any point. Well, I mean, I'm happy to. You have to talk to Rob. Okay. So, okay, which prayers are we doing? Page 8. Oh, just the first two? First three. Okay. Gewade nyududa lama sange drugyone droa chiya malupa de salagaba sho janchu sancho rinpoche manke panam ke gyoche kya pa nyamba me payam gone gondu pawa sho Toni tawa rinpoche manke panam ke gyoche kya pa nyamba me payam gone gondu pawa sho. Okay, and then over the page, let's do the long life prayers in English. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Savior of the land of snow, teachings and transmigratory beings, who extensively clarifies the path that unifies emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Lozong father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of infinite, and please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Buddha's teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armour of patience that is never discouraged, incomparable venerable Guru, to your neck requests. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge. The mother of living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions, I missed the verse, nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta, and the victorious ones, made a smile of reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganda tradition, essence of the Buddha's teachings, foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme, We make this prayer of supplication, Lama, please live long. And just over the prayer, the request for the Lama to remain long. May my perfect Guru's life be long, and his white actions flourish in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Laws and Drapa always remain, dispelling the darkness of transmigratory beings of the 3 elements. All right, thank you. Shall I press stop? And,
Stops.
um,